Welcome to Illini Drive on 107.1 WPGU. If you're hearing me right now, you know I'm not the typical person you hear on Tuesday evenings on this station. Gabby and Josh are both doing other things today, covering the game, more important stuff. So you hear me, but along with me, you would usually hear Nathan. Today, we have a new voice in the studio. DI Sports beat writer and DI long form writer, covered some news. Very, very almost like a Swiss Army knife of journalism in the building today. Claire O'Brien. Claire, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah. So, as Brendyn introduced myself, I'm Claire O'Brien. I'm a sports writer and a long form writer at the Daily Illini. Over in sports, I cover women's basketball, and long form, I tend to take a look at investigative stories that are about the university.
Yeah, definitely. Shout out to you. You won an award for your long form at the Illinois College Press Association. So very talented journalist we have in the studio today.
Brendyn's really humble, but he also won he won 2 awards.
Yeah, for some stuff. But obviously, if you're listening, maybe you're not, because Illinois is actually playing right now. They're playing Michigan State. They're up 3-0 right now. 18 minutes left in the first half. Claire, we really haven't been able to pick your brain this first time in the studio, at least this year.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about this Illinois team?
Well, I think this team, like we talked before we came on here, the men's team's they can be a little inconsistent, like we saw losing to Maryland. But yeah, they're just on a roll right now, and that's pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, definitely. Their roll, seven straight games. They look to make it 8 ever since Jacob Grandison was kind of inserted into that starting lineup. But yeah, it's more or less in a way that, as your journalistic or sports writing head, how do you feel as like a student and as a fan?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's interesting because tonight the Illinois men's basketball team is playing Michigan State. And I think a couple of years ago, we kind of saw that turning point against Michigan State. They upset Michigan State, stormed the court. Unfortunately, I had a midterm, so I didn't get to go to the game.
I was also not at that game. I didn't have midterms, but I just thought they were going to lose, so I didn't go. Very unfortunate for me.
Yeah. No, I had a midterm, so I couldn't go to first place. But so I think that kind of marked a turning point in Illinois basketball where they started to get good. I mean, it's been a progression over the past couple of years, as we've seen, and now the team's 16-5 and up 5-2 on Michigan State right now. So,
yeah, it's very interesting that you bring that up. I almost forget that was kind of the dawn or the beginning of what we see as Illinois basketball right now. Like, that was one of, obviously we know Ayo as such a clutch shooter, such a clutch guy in NCAA, but that was maybe one of his first times that he was really on the national stage, beating that team, which I think was ranked 9th at the time.
Yeah, they were top 10.
Yeah, Illinois was unranked, obviously beat them in Champaign. What a great day to be an Illinois fan. And as we see these two programs, Michigan State was pretty good last year, but losing some guys graduating, and then talent like Rocket Watts not really living up to the hype that people thought he would have after last season. Michigan State is at the lower mid-tier of the Big Ten right now, trying to figure it out. Yesterday, me and Nathan kind of talked about the fact that maybe they're like a fringe bubble team, meaning like they have to have pretty much a perfect rest of the season to even have a chance to make the NCAA tournament. When you're looking at the landscape of the Big Ten, how are you feeling about Michigan State?
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting. I think Michigan State's kind of having an off year. They're always a very strong team. And whenever Illinois played them, I always was like, it's going to be a tight one for Illinois. But yeah, I think Michigan State, like I said, I think they're just kind of having an off year this year.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to pull up some stats really quickly. Obviously, we know what Illinois brings to the table, right? You have leading scorer Ayo and Kofi Coburn not far behind him with Ayo having 21 points a game, Kofi 17.5 points a game. Obviously, Kofi Coburn leads in rebounding 10.5 a game. One of the leading double-double guys in the nation, Ayo with 5 assists a game. This is when you look at this team, this Illinois team, it's a 1-2 punch type of team. But I think the difference in this team is when role players actually get out and they do what they have to do. You see guys like in the Minnesota game, for instance, Trent Frazier had an amazing first half.
Yeah.
Other guys like Jacob Grandison had really good games. When the role players on this team are going, it's really hard to stop them. because it's hard to stop them when Io DeSumo and Kofi Coburn are going. So it's very interesting to watch this team, and I think obviously that's how you have to start this game.
Oh yeah, and it's kind of interesting you mentioned Trent had a good first half against Minnesota because you saw that like half court lob that he made.
That was amazing.
Yeah, yeah, and he's done that before too. Like last year against Nebraska, I actually like found the YouTube video and just like tweeted it. But yeah, it was just like so that's like the second time he's made a shot like that in a game.
I said that was like pretty much if you could think of Trent Frazier in one play, like that was like the most Trent Frazier shot, jumping in to steal the pass in the passing lane and throwing a half court heave and nothing but net. Like I feel like that just describes Trent as in terms of he kind of has those highlights every once in a while that you just sit back and you're like, man, like that was wild. And in that game, I mean, he had 6 steals, most of them coming off of his ability. I see it as almost like a defensive back in football to kind of sit back and then jump the ball as soon as it comes.
Right.
But yeah, he leads the team in steals at 1.5 steals a game. But yeah, this team is really good right now. They're ranked 5th in the nation, obviously in the AP poll. Michigan is above them. Ohio State is above them. Baylor and Gonzaga, obviously the only 2 teams that they've played that are above them. Ohio State, in which they lost by 6, I think, in Champaign, in a game that wasn't Illinois' best game by any means, but was kind of the game that Ohio State kind of kicked off their competitive season with. And then they obviously played Baylor in the non-conference stretch.
Yeah.
Very competitive first half. The second half kind of got away from Illinois, though. But yeah, I mean, this team is very exciting, and I mean, as students and as fans, like it's very nice to see a team be good because I know you remember our freshman year. It was tough to watch at times.
Yeah, well, and that's a lot of like with Illinois sports is a lot of them were very difficult to watch. And I mean, like even like with football this year, like they weren't particularly consistent,
right?
And so that was like the one time I was like, okay, I'm glad I can watch this on TV.
Yeah, and that's the thing with this team is like we talk about it all the time. It's kind of like that Illinois curse. Like as Illinois fans, like we're kind of like very scared to feel comfortable with being good. Even like you think about football from last season, from the 2019-2020 season, had some strides, beat a Wisconsin team that they weren't supposed to beat, had an amazing comeback against Michigan State, and made it to a bowl game, right? And we thought maybe that was the thing that would kick off Illinois football being really good. And then this year they went 2-7, fired their head coach, and a lot of things went wrong. So I think right now Illinois fans are in a space where they're kind of scared to be, happy and content. And I think the team has shown them at times places where maybe they should have, reason for concern. We can look back to before this 7-game winning streak, losses to Maryland and Rutgers, and you could even throw in maybe the Missouri game, all games that Illinois on paper should not have lost. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And there was like another game in that. Oh, the Nebraska game. Yeah, a couple weeks ago. They where it was so competitive, and you think like, should it have been that competitive?
Well, yeah. Like entering that game, Illinois was obviously second in the Big Ten. Nebraska had yet to have a Big Ten win. And was dead last, and they've obviously seen their struggles this year. But it was kind of frustrating as that game was closing out, and then you look at the clock and there's 3 minutes left, and Illinois is down 7, and you obviously have to have some sort of late game heroics by Io DeSumo, something that as Illinois fans we're all really accustomed to kind of bring them out of that game, and that was scary. And I think that's when you look at this season as a whole, like some of those types of games are what scares me the most when it comes to looking forward, especially into past the Big Ten tournament in the NCAA tournament, because you look at, you don't really have, you can kind of plan out your route when you get the NCAA tournament bracket, but it's kind of hard to scout sometimes. Like you're not really sure which teams you're going to get. They're from different conferences. They're teams you don't see a lot, especially this year when you have such a limited non-conference play stretch. But I think that's what's going to limit this team the most. Sometimes they play down to their competition.
Ugh, Michigan State's on a 6-0 run right now.
Yeah.
6-5. Oof.
Me and Claire are both watching this in the office or in the studio. So
yeah, we're 6 feet apart. We're masks, people.
6 feet apart, masks, dividers, everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, when this comes together, that's what I'm saying with this team. Like if it comes together at the right time and everything works perfectly, like this team can be special. And then we talk about this pretty much every episode or every show when we talk about this. And there's a game we're previewing or talking about. We've seen a lot of times this season when their game comes together, right? You look at Wisconsin, you look at Minnesota, you look at the Duke game in the beginning of the year. When they play really, really well together, they're almost impossible to beat. Now, as Michigan's on an 8-0 scoring run, we're not really seeing that right now. You know what I mean? How do you feel about that?
It's just I feel like that's the thing with being an Illinois fan is like it's very hard. The thing about the team this year, it's like they have a very good record, but a lot of times the consistency that's a different story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you saw Minnesota just complete dominance,
right?
And now this evening you see Illinois kind of struggling. And I know Michigan State and Minnesota are two completely different teams, but it's just like, it's just kind of interesting.
And it makes it weird, and I'm not really sure. What do you think that comes from?
I don't know. I think it's I think a lot of it also, fans can't go to games this year.
Right.
So you can't have that fan energy, which again, this is like the one year I think people would have really enjoyed going to the State Farm Center and going to games and
yeah. I think that's a huge thing with that you miss from these games. Obviously, which is weird because you think about Minnesota, a team that has had such a dominating home court advantage. I think they've been 13-2 at home court, but have yet to win a game outside of Minnesota. Which is really weird. It's weird that we kind of see less of a home court advantage, but also with teams like Minnesota they were good. But it was good for Illinois to be able to overcome that. That's what's surprising about this team. Michigan went to Minnesota, Iowa went to Minnesota, and Indiana went to Minnesota, and Ohio State went to Minnesota. All lost in Minnesota.
Yeah.
But Illinois routed Minnesota 31 points. It was weird. It's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, the Big Ten, it's March Madness all year round.
Yeah. As you're looking forward to this basketball season, they're in a stretch where they are playing a lot of games really quickly. I mean, they had a game on Saturday. Now it's Tuesday. They have a game on Thursday. They have a game on Saturday again, and then Tuesday again. They play, obviously, Michigan State today. I think it's Nebraska. Nebraska, and then on Thursday. Then it's Wisconsin on Saturday, Michigan on Tuesday, and then a little bit of break until you see Ohio State. But what do you think? What are you looking for this team to do in the next 2 weeks to kind of solidify that as they head into the Big Ten tournament?
Yeah, well, I think the Nebraska game, I mean, it's a home game, so I think Illinois, hopefully they don't go to overtime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think Wisconsin, Illinois should do pretty well there. I remember last year the men's basketball team beat Wisconsin up at Madison, which I think, again, might have been another turning point.
Right.
I think the Michigan State game 2 years ago was kind of like a glimpse, and then Wisconsin was more of the Illinois started to get really good after that.
Definitely.
But I remember I saw a tweet that was like, well, we've used up our one win against Wisconsin for the decade. See y'all in 2021.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so hopefully that tweet isn't, a prophecy. But.
Definitely. Well, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, we'll try to keep you updated on this game as the show goes along. But that'll lead us to our first break. When we get back, Claire covers a lot of women's basketball. That team is struggling right now, so we'll try to pick Claire's brain about it, see what's up, and see what their future holds at 107.1 WPGU. Welcome back to Illini Drive on 107.1 WPGU. Illinois is down. Kofi Coburn just dunked. So they are now down 14-12 with 10.5 minutes left in the first half. We barely talked about this in our last segment. But Ayo Dosunmu we talk about him so much. So it gets not old, but this feeling of we already know what he's going to do. But I don't think it can be understated how well he's playing this year. Yeah. Averaging almost 22 points a game, 5 assists, 5 rebounds. He's shooting 50% from the field, 40% from three. I think 80% from the free throw line. he's playing really good defense. He's having a really good year, really trying to boost up his draft stock, something that he wanted to do last year, could not do obviously because of all the things that happened at the end of the year with coronavirus. But this year he's really trying to make a statement and has made a pretty good case for being the best player in the nation. Illinois has 4 program history triple doubles. After the last 2 weeks ago, they only had 2, and it's because Audisumu has had 2 in the last 2 weeks. Claire, watching those games, what was it like to just like see somebody dominate like that?
Oh, I think Io up and up. He was shooting a 3, and unfortunately didn't go in. Michigan State's got a 5-point lead now, so yeah. But seeing Io just dominate like that, I think in a sense, like Io committing to U of I,
right,
and playing for the program, I think that again, I think it's also made a lot of difference. I mean, Io's in state, so that also
that was a huge thing. I mean, just being a Chicago kid, having that confidence, right? Because I mean, we hear about I don't want to call them old people, but people who are fans of Illinois who have been fans since, like the 80s and the 90s and even early 2000s. Like, people who talk about Illinois is like, man, like everybody wanted to go there if you were in Illinois. Like, that was a school to go to. Like, they had a recruiting base in Illinois. They tried to get kids from Indiana. They were getting kids from the Midwest. That was an important thing because, I mean, there's a lot of basketball talent in the Midwest. I mean, we see people all the time. Chicago, Derrick Rose, Dwayne Wade, Anthony Davis. Indiana, you have, guys like that coming out of there. So it's really good to see somebody, and you kind of saw that pipeline start with Audisumu being able to, take that step and not only just be an Illinois player from Chicago, but be arguably, one of the best people to ever put on the Illinois jersey and come play. We've seen it now with Adam Miller, some guy who's from Chicago, was a 4-star, really bought in because of the same process that Io went through. So I don't think it could really be understated how, like, we see him do magic on the court pretty much every night he plays, but I don't think it could be understated his legacy and like what he's going to leave behind in terms of how important he is to other people who want to come to Illinois.
Oh yeah, and I mean they also just have like Io stats up.
I was just looking. Yeah, I mean he ranked second in Big Ten in points. I think was that second in assists. He's having just a phenomenal year, and I don't really know how to put it much into words because like we talk about it all the time, but I just want. Yesterday I kind of came to the realization, or maybe it was Saturday when I was watching that game. It's like, man, like buckle up because Audisumu has maybe 12 or 13 more games in an Illinois jersey, and then it's over, and then you're gonna have to watch him in the NBA because he won't be back next year. But if you could sum up, I guess, as an Illinois fan, how you felt about Io in the last few years, how would you do that?
Well, I think Io's been a crucial part in the success that you've seen in the Underwood era.
Yeah.
I think, a lot of times a program that maybe hasn't been so successful, they get a good recruit and that just opens the floodgates and a lot of good recruits come. And I think Io's done that for Illinois.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing that I think it's pretty much like a 2-man job with this because obviously you see Brad Underwood, he has the success with recruiting. He has a plan, a scheme on the court that has worked for him. He's obviously changed it. We saw that last year, totally revamping his defensive scheme and even his offensive scheme around Kofi Cockburn because of how dominant of a figure he is. But you kind of need that. You can't just have a great coach, right? Or you can't just have a great player. So putting them together and Brad Underwood being able to get out of the Sumu after his first or second year as the head coach is so important, to even Brad's legacy as an Illinois coach.
Yeah, I think Io committed like just before Brad's first season in it. So
yeah. I mean, it's special to see. It's wild to watch right now. Obviously, they're down 4 right now to Michigan State. This is a well-coached team. This is a team that has a lot of D1 talent. I'm not really nervous about this game. I obviously think they can come back. But let's shift a little bit of our focus to the other D1 basketball program at Illinois. Illinois women's basketball, they're currently 3-15, 1-4 in the conference. Unfortunately, they're on a 4-game losing streak. They also had a 10-game losing streak in the middle of the season as they started Big Ten play. Claire, you cover this team. You know this team better than a lot of people.
Yeah.
How has this season been for you?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'll just back up by saying I jumped back on the beat like just after Christmas, so I've really only been on like conference and like the second half.
Yeah.
But it's been. I covered the team last year too, and I think you're seeing more consistency this year, I think, than you saw last year. But the win against Purdue, I was there at State Farm Center.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting. It was like the last minute,
right?
And it was tied, and I'm sitting there like tweeting,
trying to figure stuff out. I remember that game because, I mean, I also covered a little bit of Illinois women's basketball last year for maybe 2 months before I took the job as the assistant editor. Yeah. But it was wild to see because I was following that Purdue game. I think I actually had a show as it was going on, but like this isn't a team that I would have ever expected could come back from a deficit. And they haven't a lot of times, and especially even this season, they haven't a lot. But seeing them come back from a deficit, like it was like, wow, like that's really nice. Like that's good to see. That made me happy because you know how hard Nancy Faye coaches these girls. You know how dedicated this team is. Last year, obviously, the leading scorer on the team, Petra Holoshinska, she transferred to UNC. She's, having similar production over there. How much do you think it has hurt this team to not have, the outside shooting presence like Petra Holoshinska?
Oh, I think it's absolutely. I think the team would have benefited from that, but I think the team this year it's pretty young. Janae Terry is leading the team in scoring, and she's a sophomore. So
yeah.
I think it's a very young, up and coming team. So I think in the next 2 years they'll also be pretty fun to watch.
This is a team that last year when I was covering them, they had Janae Terry, Jada Peebles, people like that who you think is like this is what is going to be the center of Illinois basketball in like 2 or 3 years. The girls that are like really raw, but have a lot of potential. And how much did Jada Peebles score the other day? Was it like 21?
Yeah.
And she was like the leading scorer. Obviously, they lost. But things happen. This is a young team. Unfortunately, it's a little far into Nancy Faye's tenure. You kind of want a little bit more. But I think there's things you can build around, like her going to get Eva Rubin. Like that was something that you could clearly see was a need for this team, right? A person in the middle that could really establish the block, play good defense, play in the post, and Nancy Faye going to go get Rubin was something that you can look at this team and be like, man, there's something to build. What do you think the future of this team needs to be, though?
The future of this team, I think they're getting really good experience this year. I know the record's kind of lopsided, but I think they have something to build off. You're absolutely right about that. And so I think in a couple of years you'll see, you're going to see like a very strong team.
Right. I hope so. I think women's basketball is like so hard because like when you look at like men's basketball, like a lot of the guys, right? Like if they're really good, they're there for like a year or two. But women's basketball is a sport where a lot of the women stay for the entire 4 years just because of, how limited the professional aspect of women's basketball is and, how much success can be gained at the college level. You look at, some of the greats even staying for a long period of time. So it's definitely hard to compete in women's basketball, but I think you need to kind of have that, growth when you're competing against, the teams like that are really good in the Big Ten, like Maryland, like Michigan, teams that have had the success, Ohio State, teams that have had the success and build off of it, and their recruiting keeps coming and stuff like that. But I also think Nancy Faye is good for the job because I'm blanking on her name right now, but there's a recruit from Minnesota who's coming next year who in her junior season last year before the pandemic was scoring like 25 points a game. A girl who's like really, really good in Minnesota basketball. And obviously you see, people coming from Minnesota who are really good at basketball all the time. So it's refreshing to see, but it's still like a little bit like, I feel like sometimes this team just leaves you wanting just a little bit more,
Yeah. Yeah. And but kind of circling back to the Maryland game, I covered that. And it was, within the first like 5 minutes of the game, Maryland was up by double digits.
Mm-hmm.
And they went on to win by like 40.
Yeah, it was 58-103 was the
35,
score.
I think.
Yeah.
I'm not a math major.
I find myself saying that a lot. Like whether that be in like on the show or on like a podcast, be like trying to do quick numbers and be like, yeah, this is why I'm a journalism major. Just math does not come quick to me.
Yeah, I'm usually pretty good with the mental math, but yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is when you look at this team, it's then they only have 3 games left, right? Northwestern, Purdue, Minnesota.
Yeah.
3 unranked games, but 3 games that, you know, are going to be hard for this team to compete. You'd hope for them to finish, you know, with 2 conference wins, seeing a lot of these people in conference, you know, multiple times. Yeah. But then there's the Big Ten tournament, and there's always, you know, the possibility that you can make a run, but it's very unlikely for Illinois, who I think is right now the last seed. To go make a run in the Big Ten tournament and try to put, you know, their name into the NCAA tournament. But so obviously I don't think that's where your head is right now. But what do you think is like the path in the future for this team?
Yeah, well, I think kind of going off what you said, I think Illinois is the only team in the Big Ten that's got 1 win. And they were winless until Purdue.
Yeah, until that Purdue game.
Yeah, and that was probably
beginning of the month. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was like I said, I was there, and then the next week they actually gave Indiana a run for their money.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I remember following that Indiana game, and it was close at the end, and it kind of obviously Indiana just kind of outlasted them. But I mean, holding Indiana, who's the 15th ranked team in the country at the time, to 58 points, and you also being able to put 50 points on them, that's kind of where you want to be. Like being able to compete with Big Ten teams. We've seen in other games, you know, losing by 20 to Northwestern, or, you know, losing by 50 to Iowa, stuff like that. Like there's games that, you know, Illinois women's basketball just isn't in and isn't competitive in, but there's also like stretches and moments where you're like, man, this team could be really good. They have talent. They have, you know, a group of women around that are like good, and they work well together, but it's just like, why can't they put it together? I think that's sometimes when you look back at this team and you're a little, you know, frustrated by it, you know?
Yeah, and and you can definitely tell, like, even in the post-game press conferences, I usually start off just kind of asking for general thoughts and then going from there. And usually it's like 9 times out of 10, it's always, you know, oh, well, you know, we need to be more consistent, or defense or something like that. It's usually the same thing.
Right.
And they usually have 1 bad quarter. And it's, for some reason, almost always the second.
Right.
Like,
does Nancy Faye ever talk about that?
I've brought it up, but it's just like, oh, well, you know, we got to play 40 minutes.
Yeah. She's the type of coach that plays it close to her chest and really protects her players, which you obviously have to respect for. But yeah, I mean, that's something that I know a lot of people are quick to, especially Illinois fans, are like quick to, you know, move on to the next coach. Like we saw it with Lovey. We have even seen it. I've seen it at times with Nancy Faye. But I think that Faye's the right woman for the job. I think she recruits really hard. It's obviously hard in women's basketball, especially when you're surrounded by so many good teams in the Big Ten. But I also think that she gets a lot out of her players. Her players respect her. They love her. So I think she's the right woman for the job. I just think sometimes, like, and she kind of remedied this a little bit. She brought in new assistant coaches. She's recruiting a little bit better. So I think it's a process, but I think we saw like a real quick turnaround with Illinois men's basketball.
Right.
And we're not really seeing that quick turnaround with Illinois women's basketball. And sometimes that could be frustrating, but I think people have to remember that college sports is a process to turn around.
Yeah, I mean, if you think that you're going to get a coach in there that's going to flip it in like 2 years,
you're
wrong. Like what Brad Underwood's done at Illinois is the exception rather than the rule.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think you see that with a lot of sports. I mean, we're going to talk about Illinois football a little bit later, but college sports, because of the recruiting, because of the historic nature of some of these teams, because of the facilities, because of everything that goes along with college sports, it takes a while to turn around a program. And what I would just caution Illinois fans to do is just to be open-minded. Listen to what Faye has to say. Trust that in recent years, she's done a lot to get this team, at least going on the right track. Is it perfect? Of course not. Is there more that can be done? Of course there is. That's why they're 3-15 right now. But there's a lot more to do, but I think she can definitely do that.
Yeah, and I think too, Faye coached at Wash U for like 29 years.
Right, and was very successful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's definitely just, you got to look at these people's records and their resumes and understand that this is a process, right? Coming to the Big Ten in women's basketball is not easy.
Right, and Faye came from Wash U, which Wash U's D3, so it's different at Illinois than it is over at Wash U.
100%. Well, that's going to lead us to our second break. When we come back, we already previewed this a little bit, but we're going to hit on some Illinois football. Haven't talked about that in a while, but this is 107.1 WPGU. Welcome back to Illini Drive on 107.1 WPGU. I really like that song. That was very calming. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, it's midterm season. Get the calming music on.
Yeah, definitely. A little bit before the break, we were talking about recruiting in general in college sports. If Brett Bielema, the new head coach for Illinois football, has decided to put his stamp on one thing, or put his name on one thing, it's definitely recruiting. He has designated zones of different counties for all his staff to be in contact with and call. He's made the pledge that he's going to call every single high school coach in Illinois. I have no idea how many high schools that are. Probably,
I think there's like 800.
800 high schools in Illinois. That's 800 coaches, give or take, and see if they think they have any players who can play on the D1 level, or at least start that pipeline to have kids from Illinois want to go to Illinois again. I mean, we see those types of pipelines in places like Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin. They have a huge retention rate when it comes to their own athletes from their own state. That's something Illinois doesn't always have when there's a lot of talent, especially Southern Illinois by St. Louis. There's a lot of talent in Northern Illinois by Chicago, Western Illinois. So it'll be very interesting to see how well he's able to do this. But I think it's a good start. Claire, how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I think, like we kind of touched on this a little bit, but Bielema, he's assigned his coaches like a region. So there's like 10 regions throughout the state, and each coach is kind of responsible for that, which I think is probably the most comprehensive recruiting program I've ever seen from any coach or university official in general here.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's look, when I heard about Brett Bielema being hired, I was a little happy. I didn't think it was some hire that's going to take your program to competing to Big Ten championships in a few years. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong. But I'm very happy that it looks like Brett Bielema is putting in the work when it comes to, hey, like, let's get boots on the ground. Let's figure out how we can start these recruiting pipelines so that kids in the future want to go to Illinois. It's a huge thing because, I mean, Illinois loses a lot of recruits to schools like Northwestern, to Wisconsin, to Indiana, to schools around, or to Iowa, to schools around the Illinois area that they really shouldn't be losing to. You know what I mean? Like, Illinois is a great academic university. Why was that so hard for me? Great academic university. Its sports fans are very passionate. It has the potential to be a really good sports school. It's been off and on the past decade, but it's very confusing to me why it's been hard in the past under the Lovie Smith era to kind of get Illinois recruits coming here. But I mean, you have to respect the guy who really wants that to happen.
Yeah, and definitely, I think Illinois football with this recruiting plan, like the university in general, has really struggled to get students from not Chicago to enroll. Actually, in my long-form study that you talked about earlier, I found that, I called up a couple guidance counselors, in Southern Illinois. They weren't quite familiar with the program.
Really? Talk to me a little bit about your long-form.
Sure, yeah. So I did a story on the University of Illinois unveiled a new financial aid program last year called Illinois Commitment. And the idea was to get a lot of students who might not have enrolled in Illinois to enroll here. And they try to focus on downstate a little bit. But I mean, most of the student body comes from
Right,
Chicago.
exactly.
So, and they do struggle to get students from downstate.
Yeah.
So I think Bielma's plan, I think it's already more comprehensive than a lot of other things the university's trying to do.
You talk a little bit about, you know, the initiative for Illinois to try to get students from everywhere. That's more like, I know your story was a little bit more on the financial side and stuff like
Right.
that. Do you think, obviously you've talked to guidance counselors, do you think having Illinois football be good could help with that?
Yeah, I definitely think that could be a big draw because, like I found that, for example, like Alexander County, like way down south, I don't think a student from there has enrolled at U of I in over 10 years.
No way.
That's what I found in my reporting.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it, I mean, I think it's simplistic to say that just football would increase interest. I think there's a lot of other things, you know, other schools might be better fits for different students. But I definitely think having a good football team, I think that makes the student life a little more vibrant. And I think that having a really vibrant campus town and vibrant student life, I think that can draw the recruits in.
Definitely. Well, halftime just hit in this Illinois game. Illinois is down 10, 36-26 to the Michigan State Spartans. They're shooting 7 of 29 right now, which is killing them, and they're letting Michigan State shoot 16 of 30. You obviously can't win like that, but some bright spots. Trent Frazier, 3 from 6 from deep. I would assume has 7 points, but he's shooting 2 for 9, so that's a little suspect. What do you think? Obviously, and there's been no field goals made by anybody on the bench for Illinois. We've been watching this game a little bit on and off. Before we get out of here, what do you think, you know, starting the second half, this team needs to do to be a little bit more competitive and try to get this win?
Yeah, I think I see a lot of Illinois. Like, there was a 3-pointer. I forget. Because I've had the game on the background.
Yeah, of course.
Got it. Yeah. Anyway. But I think, you know, like, an open 3, and it was just brick.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't be bricking the threes.
You have to make your open shots. So, yeah, that'll be important. That'll be something to look forward to. But we're going to get out of here a little bit early. Make sure the next show has time to do their show. But Claire, thank you so much for joining the show, for filling in.
Thanks for having me.
It's very fun. We're obviously going to try to get you more in the studio as the year goes on. But any last thoughts on Illinois sports you want to share with the viewers?
Yeah, I think the Illinois men's basketball team, I think, is going to be making a pretty good run this year. Although I might have just jinxed it, so sorry, everyone.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, it's knock on wood. But yeah, and I think the women's basketball team is going to be really competitive in a couple of years. And football, I think it'll probably take some time for Bielma to build that pipeline, but I think it'll happen. So yeah.
Definitely. Well, this has been another edition of Illini Drive. Tune in tomorrow. It'll be me and Nathan back to talk about the ending of this game, however this ends. But yeah, for me, for Claire, this has been Illini Drive at 107.1 WPGU.